Welcome, and thank you for joining us on Get the Tea with Buta. Today, I'm joined by our co-hosts, Priscilla Aybar and Lisa Jones. We have the honor of also having our tech guru with us, Nick Gothard. And I don't know why I always say like we're honored to have him, because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here. So he's going to be your more constant fix than anybody else. And we are always appreciative for his services. We do have the additional honor of having Jennifer Carroll Foy. Some of you may know Jennifer Carroll Foy. She was a delegate up until recently, which she resigned from her position. And she'll talk a little bit about the reasons why. And I think you'll be very excited to hear the why. But this morning, what we're going to be able to try to do is be able to have her tell her story so we can learn a little bit more about who she is as a person. So Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Yes. Hi, Buta. It's great to see you again. And it's fantastic to be here. So thank you for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure. So as we indicated, we welcome you to the show. Just wanted to give you a couple of minutes to just introduce yourself to the audience who may not know who you are. And then we'll just get into our conversation.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Carroll Foy, and I am running for governor here in Virginia. And I am running for governor for a really simple reason, because the broken status quo is just not working, and it's left too many Virginians behind. And in order for us to have real change, we have to vote it in. And so in order to ensure that all communities are able to thrive, we need a new leader with a clear vision and bold, fresh ideas on exactly how to get things done. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation to answer your very poignant questions, and for you all to get to know me better and see why I am the best and only choice to be your next governor here in Virginia.
Right. Well, Jennifer, thank you for sharing that with us. And what we want to be able to do is really give our audience an opportunity to see who you are as a person, and just as importantly, how you got here, not just in the position that you are running for and the prior position you had as a delegate, but as a person. My understanding is that you grew up in Petersburg.
Yeah, that's right. Grew up in Petersburg, Virginia. Petersburg having, let's go back. So Petersburg was actually one of the most affluent African-American communities in the Commonwealth. It was a hub for the civil rights movement. We had our own, Black Wall Street in that area. But, as jobs and, economic development left, despair, drugs, violence, and other things crept in. And that's where the problems began. And so you saw the disinvestments made in the community. You saw a lot of politicians not keeping their promises and bringing jobs and opportunities into cities like Petersburg. But it's not just Petersburg. It's Danville, it's Portsmouth, it's Pulaski, it's, parts in Page County. I mean, you see it everywhere. While some communities have been doing well, some places have not. And so today, Petersburg has one of the highest child poverty rates and rates of unaccredited schools in all of Virginia. It was also named one of the most dangerous places to live per capita as well. And
Did you attend the public schools out there when you were growing up?
I sure did. I was born, raised, graduated from Petersburg High School.
All right. And now you were raised by your grandmother, were you not?
I was raised by my grandparents. That's right. My grandparents, but my grandmother took the lead, of course.
Okay. Now, do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I have 3 sisters and I have 2 brothers.
What number are you of the pack?
I am the oldest.
No responsibility there at all.
None whatsoever.
Yeah. So now when you were in high school, you had actually attended some of what I would call non-traditional aspect of programs available in high school. What was that?
So I was, and so tell me, say that question one more time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I was getting to the fact that you, when you were in high school, besides just doing your regular curriculum, you also participated in the junior ROTC?
Yes. So I was a member of the JROTC program. Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose to do that?
Mainly it's because initially I couldn't make up my mind what I want to do. So I was trying everything. I tried volleyball, hated it. Tried, soccer, hated it. Tried tennis, hated it. And so I couldn't find my niche, but then track and JROTC were the things that I thrived at. And I think it was the challenge. I think it was camaraderie and was really my coach. And it was actually my sergeant major who served as mentors and surrogate fathers for me, who really helped me develop and find that this is what I was built to do.
And back then, what was the makeup between the girls and the boys as far as that program that you had in Petersburg?
Mm-hmm. So majority all men. It was a handful of us women that were in the JROTC program, and we were absolutely fabulous. Let me tell you. I mean, we were just great because the guys thought they were great. And so, it was just so competitive. And I think that's where, we really learned to meet the challenges, and, we just defied the odds, and we just had something to prove. We were going through our feminist phase, I believe, we can do anything that a guy can do, and better. And so I think that having all of that camaraderie and that healthy competition and learning leadership, learning, how to get things done. And, it was fantastic. And you needed that because Petersburg is a place that you could really get in a lot of trouble if you have idle minds and idle time. So the best thing that my grandparents did was have me active all the time, 24/7. So track, JROTC, enthralled into school and my schoolwork. That's what it was.
And I think that's a great thing for your grandparents to identify and for you to embrace, because you're exactly right. When we were growing up in New York City, that was the one thing that you could not have as a kid was free time. Mm-hmm. So sports saved us, a lot of the members of my family, from having that maybe that attraction or that freedom to be able to do something other than that. But the sports gave us structure. So I see that the military also did the same thing for you. Now, that you being yet again in the minority group when you were doing the JROTC, also carried you over when you entered VMI, did it not?
Oh, it absolutely did. But it was different. And so when I was in the JROTC program, I was in the minority because I was simply because I was a woman. But Petersburg is a majority minority community. And so predominantly African American. So to go from that type of community to then be thrown into an atmosphere where, it is only a handful of, women, and then a smaller minority within that minority are Black women, it was an awakening, I could tell you that. So to go from Petersburg to a school founded during Confederacy, right? It was definitely a change.
So now you just mentioned the fact that you're a minority on a number of different levels. And let me just focus a little bit on the woman aspect of it. The class that you participated in, that was one of the earlier classes that VMI actually even allowed women to participate, was it not?
That is absolutely true. So I was in the third class of women. I remember watching the Virginia Military Institute Supreme Court decision on TV. And that's where I learned that VMI paid millions of dollars to keep women out of its doors. And the men in my class, in my JROTC class, said things like, well, women are born inferior. We have a place and we need to stay in it. And my favorite reason why women shouldn't be able to go to an all-male military college is because we would be a distraction to men. So, once all those things were said, and I heard the words of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she said that women can do all things if given the opportunity. So after that, it was a done deal.
Okay, so obviously you don't like to take a challenge at all.
No, I can't clear them. I shrink.
Exactly. So now you were talking about your background in Petersburg, as far as it is also a high crime area. There's just a lot of challenges for people to be able to work themselves through opportunities to better opportunities. You decided then to go to law school. What was, how did you come to that decision?
So I actually, after my time at Virginia Military Institute, I actually received my master's from Virginia State University, so Hail State, a wonderful HBCU here in Virginia. And I taught there, and then decided to become a foster parent, and then decided to go to law school in San Diego, California at Thomas Jefferson School of Law.
Okay, so all this time, your whole life, you stayed in Virginia, and then you decided to do something small, like go to the West Coast. Mm-hmm. How did we get you back?
So after law school, I practiced in Los Angeles for a while as a litigator, And listen, I loved it. I remember being in, I think it was like in Whole Foods or something. And I looked across the oranges and there was Denzel Washington. And I'm like, excuse me. And I just remember my friend I was with, she just like looked at me. She said, girl, you better not embarrass me in this Whole Foods right now. But I'm like, Washington. I don't like everyone. I'm like, how are you guys not seeing this? And so it's just like things like that. It was exciting and it was fun. But I missed home. You know, at the end of the day, it's nothing and nowhere like Virginia. So all of my family's still here. And so I came back and practiced as a magistrate, a judicial officer, and then ended up going to be a public defender.
Okay. Now share a little bit, because I think a fair amount of the people in our community know what a public defender is, and they also may know what a magistrate is. Can you just give us a brief description on the roles of each of them play in our criminal justice system?
Sure. So a magistrate judicial officer, or otherwise known as a magistrate judge, what happens is that when an officer takes a person into custody who's alleged to have committed a crime, they bring them before a magistrate. They're open 24 hours. The magistrate duties are to determine if there's probable cause for someone to be issued an arrest warrant. They do search warrants. They do bond hearings, determine if someone is safe enough to be released before their court date, and a number of other things. But, you know, how I ended up in that position is I'll just never forget seeing the revolving door of Black and brown people coming before me. I was a magistrate in Richmond at the time, and just seeing the fact that so many people were being released or not, and it was dependent upon how much money they had in their checking account, right? And I was like, this isn't what I was signed up for. So I could be a part of the problem, I felt, or part of the solution. And I decided to become a public defender. And so a public defender, we represent people who are more than 100% below the poverty line, people who can't afford representation when they're charged with a crime. And the majority of my clients were people who, of course, are indigent, people who sometimes suffer from mental illness and substance abuse, and children. And working at the Arlington office was amazing because they have a holistic approach. We don't just represent you in your charge, we represent you, period. And so my job is to make sure I never see you again in the criminal realm. And so if a person, is homeless, trying to get them connected with services, if they have substance abuse issues, getting them connected, with treatment and therapy. And so I love the holistic approach that the public defender's offices in Virginia take when we represent clients, because that's the best way to reduce recidivism and keep it low.
Now, you mentioned how the approach through the public defender's office was a holistic approach. And I'm sure because you have been very much a proponent and a supporter of a lot of the changes that have occurred especially in the Northern Virginia area with our Commonwealth attorney's offices. Those are our chief prosecutors. And where a series of us have also wanted to have that holistic approach as to how we're dealing with cases coming before the courts, so that we do have that right answer in the end, is making sure we have the right person who's coming before the courts and is being consequenced. And then the more global response, which is to keep our communities safe, is to reduce the recidivism. I know we've had this conversation in our community, which is to say that if you reduce recidivism, you have to start looking at it not necessarily on the tail end, but what it means on the front end. That means we have fewer victims. That's the safety that we're trying to obtain. So that's great to hear from your perspective on that. Now, with the public defender's office, you had quite a opportunity for you to learn, as you said, from inside the system as to what was going on. So tell us a little bit how you then transferred that when you decided to be a delegate and you embraced those issues as part of your platform.
Mm-hmm. So the great thing about, being in positions like being a community organizer and a public defender is that you bring a different lens to issues. And so being being the first public defender ever elected to the General Assembly, I can't tell you how many times, I have to sit at a table with all prosecutors who are also legislators and to help address some of their misconceptions, and that only guilty people plead guilty, or confess the crimes, and having to tell them about a client that I had. And she had some mental illness issues, and she was charged with assault and battery. The allegation was that she struck the woman first. She accepted a plea deal. Come to find out later, there was a video that was found. Watched the video, it was totally not correct. She was actually the victim. And then having to work hard to get that case reopened, get that conviction overturned. And I asked her, I said, why did you plead guilty to this crime when you didn't do it? And her words will always stick with me. What she said was, I'm crazy. No one would ever believe me anyway. And so you don't know these things until you live and experience these things. And so when people say things like only guilty people plead guilty, bringing that personal testimony to bear and say that's not true, right? Or just believing that people who commit crimes are just, deplorable, and not that sometimes they are victims of circumstance. Having a 12-year-old I represented, and it was middle of winter, snow on the ground. All he had was a windbreaker on his back, really thin. No mom, dad was in jail, mom nowhere to be found. And he walked into a store, put a coat on, and walked out. And this is when we had a $200 grand larceny threshold, and fighting to keep him from being, a convicted felon. And, trying to ask him, like, what would happen? What's going on here? Come to find out, his response, it made too much sense. It was, I was cold and I didn't know what else to do. So my question is this child deserve to be a convicted felon, or should we put everyone else on trial today? Should his parents be on trial today for failing him? Should his school be on trial for failing him? Should the system be on trial for failing him in this moment? Because is this really, truly the punishment fitting the crime? I would definitely argue not. And so those are some of the problems that we have here, and trying to help these prosecutors or legislators who are inexperienced with the criminal justice system understand the defects that we have there, and how we can improve it. Because when you live it and breathe it and you go into court every day fighting against it, then you know what needs to happen. And so bringing that experience to bear, that's why I've been trying my best to lead the charge on criminal justice reform, helping people understand the collateral consequences of some of the bills that we have and we try to pass. Because it might be good in theory, but sometimes you have things that have racial or gender or socioeconomic disparate impacts on particular communities. You didn't necessarily think it did, but that doesn't matter when that's the actual result. So all of these things are things that I'm excited about, and that's why we need more people from different types of experiences and from different places and races and religious groups and socioeconomic statuses, because when you have more voices at the table, you get better bills, you get better budgets. And that's just how it works.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Once you're in the system, you do have all of these stories as to how our system impacts people, to kind of draw a little bit of synchronicity from what you just said with your juvenile client. We had, as being the prosecutor, a guy in our office last year. He was charged with 8 felony grand larcenies, and they were because there was the third strike, which we're going to get back, which the General Assembly just fixed. But basically, he had stolen at least on 2 prior occasions, and each one thereafter, it doesn't matter the value, is a felony offense. And we have 8 charges that law enforcement took out against him. So when the attorney in my office came to me with the case, they said, well, I want to discuss this case with you. I was like, sure, whatever you want to discuss, let's go. And they bring this to me and says, the guy's charged with 8 felony offenses. And I'm thinking it's some huge theft going on. And what this guy, the accused, was doing was stealing from Wegmans. And what he was doing is stealing lunch from Wegmans. And when we get into the story a little bit more through pretrial and working with his counsel, as well as the law enforcement, we come to learn that he was a vet. So here we have a veteran who has served our country, who is homeless, can't afford food, so he's reduced to going and stealing food from Wegmans. And we ended up resolving the case to be able to have that holistic approach. And I remember being challenged by the judge on that case, saying that why would we not put him in jail? Because how else would he get services? And I told her that's the problem that we have with the criminal justice system, is because we rely on law enforcement to try to fix everything. We rely on our jails to try to do everything. And that's not the place for it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that that was very much going back a little bit, because it resonated your story as far as like, who do we go against? You know, we can go against that person who committed the crime, or is it the system that we go against? Is it the school for failing the kid? Is it the parents for failing? And in this case, it should have been a direct indictment to our community. We're Loudoun County. How do we let this happen to one of our own? So that's the constant challenge.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So those are the things that we want to be able to identify as the greater solution, and try to figure out what is the harm that we are forcing on someone by making them go through that system through the traditional way, if we could use that phrase.
That's right. And Buta, that's what justice is, right? And that's something that I appreciate about you, and it's something I appreciate about Krysta in Arlington, you know, who I recruited to run for Commonwealth Attorney, and Amy Ashworth in Prince William County, who I recruited to run for Commonwealth Attorney, because you all get it. You understand that justice doesn't always equate to a conviction, right? And so there are some, you know, prosecutors out there, there's some people out there who feel like, throw the book at them, you know, mitigation doesn't matter, you know, and just want to treat people as, you know, not people, but as a number, right? And we need this many convictions, right? We need to, it doesn't matter. And so it's just, that's the problem, because sometimes justice looks like this person who is on honor roll, which is the case I had, 18-year-old honor roll, never been in trouble a day in her life, peer pressured by friends to walk out of Walmart with a t-shirt. Maybe it's not her being a felon for the rest of her life is what needs to happen, but maybe it is actually her doing community service and, you know, learning from her mistakes and taking a shoplifting diversion course, so that way we never see her again. Because guess what? Everyone deserves second chances, not just the wealthy and well-connected. So that's one of the things I say I really appreciate about, you know, many of the prosecutors that we now have in Northern Virginia and sprinkled throughout the Commonwealth, because you all get it.
Well, thank you for that.
And yes, thank you. And Jennifer, you know, you've witnessed the systemic flaws that define our criminal justice system, and you have an amazing criminal justice reform platform. If you were to become governor, like, what changes would you apply, or, you know, maybe modifications, whether it's not something you would want to change with the policies we currently have in place?
Mm-hmm. So Priscilla, we're going to own it. So we're going to say when. So when I become governor, yes. So when I become governor, some things that I am, you know, excited to get done. Number one is reforming our cash bail system. So that's something I've been championing for a number of years and haven't been able to make it through the General Assembly. But cash bail, along with, you know, possession of marijuana, things like that, has single-handedly contributed the most to mass incarceration in Virginia. The majority of people who are sitting in jail now are sitting there pre-trial, meaning they haven't been convicted of a single thing. They're sitting there usually because they can't afford their freedom. So we have a two-tier criminal justice system in Virginia. You're more likely to sit in jail pre-trial if you are Black, poor, and innocent than if you're white, wealthy, and guilty. And that's a problem. And so this justice for profit system, it has to stop. It should really be about if a person is a danger to themselves, the community, or a flight risk. And then are there pretrial services that we can put in place to mitigate those risks? But I've never seen anyone or had a client who say, you know what, I was going to go out and rob this store, but because I paid $50, you know, to the court, that changed my mind. It just never happens that way. And it gives us a false sense of security to believe otherwise. So making sure we have the information to know what makes people, you know, recidivate when they're on, you know, being released pretrial, and what can we do to mitigate it? So collecting that information so we can make evidence-based decisions to reform our cash bail system is utmost importance. And having the presumption that people should be released. They have yet to be found guilty of a crime. They have been charged with something. But I have clients who will sit there because they're too poor to pay, lose their job, their house. I've had clients who lost their kids because when those kids got off the bus, there was no one there to pick them up. And so, again, it's a systemic problem that definitely needs to be addressed. I can say that I carried the legalization of marijuana legislation for several years. It finally got passed in the General Assembly, but now is where the real work starts, because we have to make sure that it's done in a way that's rooted in equity. We don't want the Walmart of weed coming into Virginia, taking up all the licenses, relegating everyone to low-level jobs like, working the cash register. We want the people who have been inequitably hurt and harmed by our draconian marijuana laws, by our disinvestments in the community, over policing, to reap the benefits of something like this. So social equity programs are extremely important to making sure that people who have those marijuana convictions are the first ones to be able to get licensed. Ensure we have full expungements for marijuana and not just sealment of records, because with sealment, people can still see. And also ensuring that we invest in those communities in real ways, like day centers, early childhood education centers, fully funding community services boards. So people with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, mental illness and substance abuse issues are getting the treatment and access they need, and preventative care. I mean, all of these type of investments to uplift these communities must happen. And then, I can go on and on. I don't know how much you want me to do, but I'm really excited even about, my two priorities is really shots in arms and people in jobs at this point. That is what's most important, ensure that we are equitably delivering these vaccines, ensuring that we are going to be able to keep our businesses open and the ones that have closed to quickly and safely reopen, especially the industries that's been hurt and harmed the most. So that's why I'm really excited about my economic development and jobs plan. I was the first gubernatorial candidate to put that out because I know how important it is. And so all of these things and building on them and our healthcare and helping, so many marginalized communities is what I'm most excited about. So as you can tell, I am a policy person. Like Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley say, policy is my love language. And I'm excited because these plans are what's going to be used as the foundation and the map to really build back our education, our environment, our healthcare, and our economy in a way that's rooted in equity.
You nailed it as far as talking about the fact that policy is where you get it, because it's also, that's your sustainability. Being in office, and every office is short term, right? Because no one's in office for life. So being in office, you have the opportunity to be able to build and establish that policy. So that's a wonderful aspect. You talked a little bit about the fact that you put out an economic plan, because jobs right now, and I don't care where you are in all this, COVID has crushed people, right? In Northern Virginia, I have to say that my community has been very fortunate because we have a high IT, workforce. We have a high government workforce. So we've had some of that stability there where they could transition from being in the community to being at home. But our frontline workers, our grocery store employees, our small business owners, that has been something that is devastating that we don't know if they are going to be able to get back from, as far as being able to survive the COVID experience. So give us a little bit more information as to your economic plan, because that's really something that I think a lot of people don't really hear or pay attention when somebody's running for an office such as the governor. What specifically are you thinking is going to be the forefront of your position?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'm really excited about with this race is the fact that, my plan is different from everyone else's, and that I will ensure that Virginia remains and continues to be the number one place to do business, while also being the best place to live, work, and raise a family. Some people have put a lot of emphasis on big corporations, but have been anti-worker, and that's a problem. And so I could tell you that, having my Rebuild Virginia Economic Council, where I brought industry and business leaders from across Virginia together to tell me what they need, because I believe in a bottoms-up approach, that this plan that I've put out has been the product, while also leaning on Virginia Economic Development Partnership, Go Virginia, and Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And so some of the things that my policy entails is, for example, putting $10 million into the Rebuild Virginia Small Business Grant. So businesses can continue to stay afloat until we get the other side of COVID. And so that's going to be really exciting. I mean, what I keep hearing is we don't need more debt. What we need is more grants. And so that'll be something that will be extremely helpful to thousands of small businesses out there that they'll be able to pull from and be able to get the resources to make payroll, keep their doors open. I also have a tax credit for businesses who have to purchase masks and PPEs to keep everyone safe, expanding the angel investor tax credit so we can insert more private capital into businesses, new businesses especially. So right now it only applies to tech startups, but to expand that, or really mainly to tech startups, but to expand that to other industries is really important. I'm also excited about my MVP program, my $1 million pledge, $5 million pledge for microloans for veterans program. And so those veterans with the entrepreneurial spirit, they'll be able to have access to capital to be able to start their own business as well. Because we know small businesses are the heart and the engine of our economy. So whatever we can do to spur more economic activity there is exactly what we want to do. It also has a lot to do with job skills training and workforce development, and not only for blue collar jobs, but new collar jobs, meaning attracting more cybersecurity, robotics, nanotech, biotechnology, automotive systems, but we have to have the workforce that's skilled, educated, and ready to be able to enter these fields, and so we can create a pipeline. So I'm excited to put money towards the SHINE program, where a person can get it certified in 2 weeks to become a solar panel installer. These renewable jobs are going to bring in about 15,000 new jobs for the next 15 years, because our chief co-patron of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, making Virginia the first southern state to have 100% zero carbon emission standard. So we have to take advantage of this clean energy market that we've created. And then it's not only that, but the G3 program, supporting Governor Northam's program of get a skill, get a job, give back, where if you're a low, moderate income student going to community college, you major in a high demand area like early childhood education, public safety, information technology, computer science, that you can actually get your degree pretty much for free. I mean, that's fantastic, because my ultimate goal is to ensure that our students do not have to, take on $100,000 of debt to get a good job with family sustaining wages. So these are just some of the foundational things that I have in my jobs and economic development plan. I'm excited to have been a delegate working in the General Assembly with the governor, passing bills and budgets that made us the #1 place to do business, that preserved our AAA bond rating, that added millions of dollars to our rainy day fund, while also now getting the support and endorsements of almost 15 unions. And because they know that I am a principal leader fighting for working families. So that's what it's about. We can definitely win at both. We just have to have a leader with the political courage, will, and know-how to get it done.
So you mentioned a little bit about, as far as the economy and the workers, as you said, being able to find themselves in a position where they can get a job, and then they can obviously, I'll change the words a little bit, pay forward to be able to invest continually in our community. There's been a large discussion, both on a federal level as well as the state levels, about the minimum wage. And in Virginia, it's $7.25. That, I am going to show my age. Back when I was in college, it was $3.75, and it had just jumped to $4.25. So that means in a period of almost 30 years, we have increased it by a couple of dollars, maybe $3 at most, right? So $3 in 30 years. We have some businesses who are able to sustain a living wage of $15 or better. I'm going to brag a little bit about on Costco. Costco just raised theirs to, I think, about $17 or $18 an hour. That's their starting wage. Then we have somebody like Walmart. Walmart's still down at the $9, $10 an hour, saying, well, we couldn't survive if we make it $15. And then we have, McDonald's, who's still keeping people at $7.25. These are huge corporations that make billions and billions of dollars in profits that are saying, well, we may not be able to survive an increase. What say you to those corporations as to how maybe they could have a better business model, that they can help the person who's building their business and also be able to not be on welfare?
Mm-hmm. So the real simple answer is that they have very strong lobbyists who make those arguments for them, and who give millions of dollars to elected officials to ensure that it doesn't happen. And that's why we have to have principal people in positions of power, elected leaders who will stand shoulder to shoulder with the people and not with special interests. Because let me be clear, we can do it. We must do it. And so it can be done. Right now, we're subsidizing all of those businesses because when they pay their workers these poverty wages, they're underemployed. And now they are eligible for Medicaid. They're eligible for SNAP benefits. So now it's everyday taxpayers, where instead of our money going towards improving our schools, helping get cars off the road to improve traffic congestion, now our money is having to go towards subsidizing these workers while the shareholders continue to profit hand over fist and leave the rest of us, struggling and holding the bag. And that just cannot happen any longer. And so that's why it's going to take someone who's gone without healthcare, who's worked minimum wage jobs, to be the next governor of Virginia, because she understands how the system works and where the problems lie, and who has the political courage to stand up to these lobbyists and special interests and say, we are now going to move working families forward in a real way, pay people family sustaining wages, because yes, before the pandemic, we had one of the lowest unemployment rates in recent memory. I think it was about 2.6%. But if you delve a little deeper, it's because people were forced to work 2 and 3 jobs to get by. So when you're talking about people with kids, those kids are at home by themselves until 8, 9 o'clock at night because, dad is working, multiple shifts. And so we don't want that. We can't have that. We're better than that. We're the 11th most wealthiest state in the nation. We can and we must do better here in Virginia.
Well, you have an amazing plan, Jennifer. And when you become governor, we'll be excited for you to implement all of those plans. Now, I want to segue into momhood. You are a mom to little ones. Can you just go over some of the challenges you face? I mean, you're running for governor now. So I'm sure, the stakes are much higher. So interested in just learning more about how you manage everything, especially now during a pandemic as well.
Yeah, so like so many moms right now, we're all wearing capes, right? We're having to do it all and be everything to the people around us. So, some of my friends, were talking about why do I feel more tired now than I did before the pandemic? And it's actually because we have no respite. Right. And so you used to compartmentalize your life. So you would pretty much get up, take the kids to school or to daycare. And so you get to take the mommy hat off, and then you get to put on the worker hat. Right now you're going to your job, owning your business, doing that work. And then you get to pick up the next hat, and then the next hat, next hat. Now we're wearing them all. Right now it's a 24-hour, cycle, 7-day a week, nonstop of working and teleworking, of the same household demands. And because let's be clear, as women, we still bear the brunt of the majority of homeschooling and household duties and child rearing, and we have to work and, doing everything else. So it is very difficult, and there's no respite. There are no timeouts. And so I have to say that I like to think of it as I'm just, trying to do as well as I can, keep all the balls in the air simultaneously and successfully, like almost every other working mom and pretty much other woman that's out there right now. So, time management has to be exceptional. Your organizational skills has to be on point. And, you get your wins where you can. So for me right now, luxury, a timeout is being able to take a bath instead of a shower. Right? That's as good as it gets. That is as good as it gets.
I'm all about baths.
Yeah, listen. So with still 2 3-year-olds banging on the door, right? But that's it. That's life right now. So trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have 5-year-old twins myself, so yeah.
Oh, so you get it. Yeah, totally.
So Jennifer, I know you have a fascinating story about running for House of Delegates the first time. And I don't think that it's one that everyone here in Loudoun knows. And I was wondering, as we start to wrap up, if you could share sort of your experience running for office and sort of what that's taught you and how it's influenced how you're running this campaign now.
Absolutely. So my story running for the House of Delegates, I never forget going to bed early on election night during Trump's election, thinking that the right thing would happen, right? And waking up, and it actually took like 3 days for it to process that this man is the, leader of the free world, someone who was bigoted and incompetent and xenophobic and homophobic. And so I'll never forget, I was sitting on the couch with my husband and we were like watching the news, and I said, you know what, I can't, right? Like I've lost so many friends on Facebook. I am tired of, cutting off the news. There has to be an answer to this, because that divisive rhetoric had like seeped down into Richmond. And instead of paying attention to the everyday issues that was really affecting us, it was this like gridlock. So it's like, you know what? I looked at my husband and said, you know what? That's it. I'm running for office. I'm running for the House of Delegates. And he kind of like was on the couch and he looked over at me and he was like, all right, you're going to do whatever you want to do anyway. So, I guess you're just telling me we're running for office. He knows who he married. So, after that, that was it. So I announced last week of January of 2017, and my husband and I became pregnant, of course, on Valentine's Day with twins. And when people found out, they told me to drop out. And people said that there's no way you could be working as a public defender, pregnant with twins, you've been outraised 4-1, and you're trying to flip a seat from red to blue. It just can't happen. And so I put my head down and I ran my race and I won. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this situation. So right now, we heard it on the presidential level, people saying that, oh, these women, it's not their time, it's not their turn. I mean, how many times have we been, in different rooms, whether it's courtrooms or boardrooms, and our credentials are questioned, right? Our experience is minimized. And unfortunately, people look to the past to determine what can happen in the future. And just because we've never had a Black woman governor in the history of our country doesn't mean that now isn't our time. So what we have to do is ignore the naysayers. And as one of my aunts used to say, one of her favorite words is, I can show you better than I can tell you. So it's really about doing the work. And luckily, elections aren't about who can raise the most money. It's about who can get the most votes. So that's why being an inspiring candidate with wonderful record and fantastic messaging, who understands the challenges that everyday Virginians face, who's been fighting for Virginians her entire life as a public defender and a foster mom and a community organizer and a legislator. I mean, all of those things help us be able to meet this moment, because we need a leader who's right for this moment, because we are a different Virginia than 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I take all of those experiences, and everything is transferable, from my military training at Virginia Military Institute to passing great bills and budgets and passing some of the most substantive bills to help women, workers, and unions in Virginia's history, to struggling and making it out of Petersburg from extreme poverty and unaccredited schools and violence, and knowing that even then being told that I would never make it out, and being here with you all today. So that's what I bring to the table. And that's what's going to help power this campaign and power me, through this, because that's how I was able to get more votes in 2017 as a down ballot delegate candidate than the governor, lieutenant governor, and the attorney general, because our message resonates. People, when they see us and they meet us, they know we're in this for the right reasons, and we will never stop fighting for the people of Virginia.
That is awesome. And thank you for actually closing on that message, almost like as if you were a lawyer.
Closing argument. Who knows?
Exactly. But the coolest thing is this, and this is also a little bit of my takeaway from you as a person. And I appreciate all the times that you've come to Loudoun County and supported the individuals in our community in any way that we've ever asked you to. So I should have probably started out with that initially. So I'm glad I did not forget to say that. But we are very appreciative of you, Jennifer. The other thing that I really like is that your life has easily been challenged by an easy no. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. But that has not been you. It's always been, no, you can't. Obviously, you don't know me, because I can and I will. And we wish that you would continue in those endeavors. And we wish you every bit of luck in your campaign for governor. So thank you very much, Jennifer Carroll Foy. We very much appreciate you, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Our pleasure. Thank you.